that. So as we did with the main meeting, we're going to record this just so we'll be able to share it. And so just to repeat what I heard you ask, Elizabeth, the question was about what kinds of outreach we've done and about just congestion and concern based on the experience during the Orange Line shutdown that we might have additional traffic backups resulting from the implementation of a bus lane on Clarendon Street. Did I get that correct?
Yeah. And I want to be clear that I have no objection to the bus lane, but the backups last year were really, really, really bad. I mean, they're bad now without a bus lane, with how the street works as it is, but with the bus lane last year being shut down, it was almost impossible to get from Storrow Drive over to the south end. And there's not really a lot of ways to travel. There's no way to avoid that street.
So I'll hand it over to Maya because I think she's been involved in some of the outreach and she can sort of speak to some of the conversations we had. I think they've been more Back Bay focused than South End focused, but Maya, do you want to just speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so because this is kind of a legacy Orange Line project, it wasn't so much that we saw this as a new project. The signs were already in place, the buses were using it as they typically did. So the outreach wasn't as intensive as it could have been. So I apologize that you hadn't heard about this before. The mayor and chief had made an announcement after the Orange Line. We saw the success of some of these interventions, like on Boylston and St. James and Clarendon. So this was a move to make those temporary interventions permanent. Last year, when our bike planners were out and about talking to folks about those plans, I had joined them and was talking to residents about these plans as well. But since there had been a lull over the winter as we were engineering these plans up, there wasn't as much outreach. So again, I'm sorry you hadn't heard about this. Another condition that's changed since the Orange Line shutdown is that so during the Orange Line shutdown, buses were going all the way up Clarendon onto Columbus. This bus lane ends at the Back Bay busway, so it doesn't go all the way quite to Columbus.
So it stops at Stewart Street.
So where the 39 turns into Back Bay in that turnaround, just before Columbus, that's where it ends.
Yeah, that's where it went last year, I think. You're talking about the turnaround. That's not where the backups happen, though. The backups, like once you get to Back Bay Station last year, that wasn't the problem. It was getting to Back Bay Station.
Can I ask which cross street you're seeing the most congestion at?
It is going from right at Stewart Street. The problem ends up being outside the old Hancock Tower, which is now, I forget what they call it now, or the new Hancock, the second Hancock Tower. And where people turn to go onto Stewart Street to go towards the expressway and where people are going straight, there is constantly double parking there. So you have people trying to go straight and everybody gets backed up going left. And then if you take another lane away for the bike lane, I mean, right now there's only 2 lanes going up towards Back Bay Station to the turnaround. And so yeah, I mean, you can't stay in the left lane because the left lane gets backed up for a whole block. And then if you try and go straight, so you're already, that's just where the backups end up happening. And it goes all the way back to you'll get stuck all the way back to Comm Ave. I mean, today I drove it and it was a half an hour from Storrow Drive to Back Bay Station.
Got it. Okay. We're happy to share more details of kind of where the design is. And I think, we can maybe set up a time to have you speak a little bit with, some of the folks working on this project in more detail to kind of get into, some of the analysis that we're seeing. There are design features, right, that are intended to reflect what we are seeing as volumes of vehicle movement. So for example, the street does allow for at Stewart Street, it actually widens by eliminating a strip of parking. It widens to allow for a dedicated left turn lane onto Stewart Street. And with a project like this, what will typically happen, we sort of noted this a little bit in the main presentation, but we're always going to take traffic counts and then we're going to rethink or use the analysis that we do on those traffic counts to make sure that we're optimizing our signals. And so, what we typically see is if the mental map is it's everything you have today, just minus one lane. More often than not, it is vastly less impactful than that, because the changes we're making to the signals, the way that we're thinking about intersection design, allows us to absorb some of the impacts of a project that does reduce lane capacity through making sure we're giving adequate time for certain moves that may take a little longer to do. That having been said, right, with a project like this, I think we are, I took a quick look at some of the initial signal analysis, and it does it adds some amount to delay, but still keeps most of the intersections within the sort of what we consider to be acceptable parameters, which is that they're not ideally overflowing back to the previous intersection. That's sort of the output that I'm seeing, but I think it's probably worth us setting up some time with you to do a more detailed walkthrough of kind of what the design looks like and what some of that analysis is showing.
I would just put out this, like, I support a lot of the changes you guys have made. I think one of the big problems when we talk about dropping a lane is dropping a lane. We have a lot of room to drop a lane in a lot of places, but the double parking that happens and the deliveries, and I don't know how to fix that, but that's what causes, I mean, as I do this every day, twice a day, well, I go back and forth twice. And it's the days when you have a delivery truck there, that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a fair point. We do observe, there is a lot of very different behaviors when you have multiple lanes versus one general purpose lane. It's far more common to see double parking when there are two lanes and when there is one. So it's a little bit of, we make streets that make it easy to double park, and that's what people do. When we make it harder to double park or more impactful to double park, we get a lot less of it. But I think we're happy to dive in a little more, unless any of my other colleagues on here want to jump in with any additional comments on this, but we'd love to set up a time to chat with you.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I was just going to say, I'm going to put my team's email in the chat. So if you want to reach out, we can set up some time to go into this further. Because like Chief mentioned, there are some signal changes and some curbside regulation changes that we hope will help the street flow a little bit better. I've done plenty of observations out there. You're absolutely right about the double parking and what happens in front of the tower. So we're hoping by updating the curbside regulations, we can help everything move a little more smoothly. Also, we know that there's a lot of work happening in the neighborhood, so we are staggering this, and especially with Clarendon, we want to push it out a little bit towards the further end of the construction season, so we can see how things are working with the other projects that are happening in Back Bay and continue our observations and modify our plans if necessary.
Great.
So I'm going to put my email for the whole transit team in the chat, and if you want to reach out, we can set up some time. That sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. Christian.
Hi, Asha. Thanks for doing this. I'm sure you'll understand I had to feed my kids dinner earlier, and I tried to record the meeting, but I did miss part of it, so I apologize if you did already answer this question. But I just wanted to get real quick what the timeline is for actual implementation and construction for this season.
Yeah. So we're happy to give you the general sense. So the three projects that are sort of in this kind of design complete phase are the Boylston Street bus bike lane, the Berkeley Street bike lane, and then the Clarendon bus lane. There's also some Boylston Street sidewalk work that's going to happen once the bus bike lane work is completed. So we are targeting May, June timeframe to do the installation of the Boylston Street bus and bike lane. We're finalizing some contractual things, but that is the first project that's going to get underway. That work will roll into the sidewalk work on Boylston Street. Berkeley Street is next up for implementation. That is also design complete. This is now, you may have missed this in the presentation, but we have shortened Berkeley Street, the Berkeley Street bike lane, to go from Columbus to Com and not continue northbound. We are repaving that stretch of Berkeley Street. And so that's actually the first order of business is curb ramps, which need to be upgraded to ADA compliance, which will be followed by repaving, which will be followed by new striping, signage, signals, and other things necessary for the bike lane. And Clarendon Street, as Maya said, is looking towards later this year, likely in the fall, there's a lot of change happening here, and so partly, it is this opportunity to observe and confirm that the things that we expect to be true are once the multiple projects are in place. Norman, is there anything you want to add about any of that, timing or anything else?
Actually, no, Chief. You covered it all in the explanation for the work that's being done there.
All right.
We're great. Sorry, doctors.
Thanks, Norman.
And I do have one other question, but somebody else has their hand raised, so I'll let them go first.
Nadar, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, that's right, Nadir Golestani. We manage a few properties in that kind of Clarendon, Dartmouth, Arlington, kind of Berkeley stretch there. And actually, I come in from the South Shore, and I completely understand and repeat what Elizabeth said about that stretch. It's that's really like the gateway into the Back Bay from the south. That is the way everyone comes in, and it's all the traffic flows in that way. So it's been tough. My real question, really, I don't know if this is the right thing, but today it must have been a busy day for deliveries, but the motorcycle delivery guys that used to be on the right-hand side between Clarendon and Dartmouth are now on the left-hand side, and they've kind of park along there. And then on the Berkeley to Arlington block, because there's food there and they're picking up there, they're now pulling onto the sidewalks. What do you put into the plan that kind of gives these guys a place to go? Because there's like 15 to 20 of them, depending on the time of the day, and probably more at lunch and dinner time. But they're driving on sidewalks. I saw one guy going down the wrong way on Boylston Street, from Arlington to Berkeley, just to get back to Berkeley Street, not wanting to deal with the traffic or sit in traffic. And there's a lot of them. So it's really what happens during construction, what happens after, where are these guys going to be sent to? Because they're pretty creative, but they're now on sidewalks. So just kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I will start by saying, right, managing delivery, especially food delivery in the Back Bay, or any kind of highly congested area. We have similar challenges in the Seaport and downtown. It is difficult, and I don't think that we have, as a city, cracked the code on this. The delivery business model relies on a large volume of low-wage people who operate in an environment where their pay is directly tied to how quickly they can work, and where they are not employees, they are not trained, they are not incentivized for safety, and that is a recipe for a lot of unsafe activities. I think one of the challenges that we struggle with is that this incentive structure is baked into the business model of companies like Uber Eats and DoorDash, and there is not any regulatory system in place that encourages those companies to do the things that might result in safer outcomes. There's a reason you don't see usually like UPS trucks driving the wrong way down a street, in part because those drivers work inside a system that provides a lot of support for them and controls and a lot of incentives for safety. So I think there is a larger kind of system issue here around food delivery and the way that industry works right now. Our job it's ultimately, I think, going to be a task for the state to figure out how to regulate that completely unregulated industry. In the meantime, what we're trying to do is bring as much order as we can to the chaos. And again, I will say I don't consider this to be a solved problem. I will show you, and I apologize because I don't have this rendered out in a sort of, let me just see now. Zoom is having a hard time sharing screens. Hold on, let me see if this works. I may have to make a settings change here. I'm going to try to share just a little bit of a plan view of what this looks like, but I might not be able to do this. If not, I will describe it. Give me 1 second here. Okay, there we go. Can you see the screen I'm sharing? Can folks see this plan? All right, good. So I'm going to zoom in here. So this is one of the things that we are trying to do here. So what you're looking at is the block of Boylston Street between Dartmouth and Clarendon. And where you see this green bike lane symbol and strip is the bike lane directly in front of Chick-fil-A, which has been the ground zero for delivery scooter riders. If you look just below that bike lane, you see the buffer that we have, and then you will see an area that is kind of in what is the parking lane, but which is bounded by flex posts. So what we are doing here is we are creating a designated zone for scooters to park while they wait for their orders. We want to keep them off the sidewalk. We want to keep them from parking in the bike lane. We want to keep them from being in chaotic situations where they are at risk or where they are putting other people at risk. And so we are creating a little bit of a scooter corral. This is a little bit of an experiment. This is not something you will find in any of the standard design manuals for streets. But what we're trying to do is organize this traffic a bit. We are also working with Chick-fil-A. They've agreed to provide basic cleanup services in this area because we can't get a street sweeper in there, as well as to provide some rider education for the people doing deliveries. So this is an experiment for how we can design a street around the volume of delivery traffic that's happening here. I will say we would rather see traffic on two wheels in small form factor vehicles than have, like you could probably fit 24 scooters in this 40-foot area. And if all of those were cars, you'd have triple parking the length of the block. So what we're trying to do is allow this delivery to happen at smaller scale, to organize it. And, working with the Boston Police Department, the goal is not to criminalize delivery riders, but also to create some level of expectation that they will operate safely and that they will not put other people at risk. So that's really the line that we're trying to walk. If this is successful, we can look at it at other areas along the block. You mentioned Berkeley to Arlington, and so we're happy to look at that there as well. But does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep. And it'll stop
it works.
sharing this. Yeah, us too. Us too. A lot of cities are dealing with this, and we've actually spoken with some of the folks in New York who are struggling with this challenge as well. Christian, I think you're up next again.
Yeah, so I was sort of along those lines with the challenges of double parking. I see this a lot in the Silver Line bus lanes on Washington Street in downtown Crossing, where bus lanes are almost useless because it's always got an Amazon van parked in it. So I'm curious if the city is considering any sort of physical protection, like those concrete barriers or something like along those lines, more to be more provide more physical separation, not just for the bike lanes, but also for the bus lanes in locations like these. And I also am curious about how these plans tie into the bus network redesign, because I'm pretty sure Clarendon is part of that high frequency network for the 39. So those are my two questions about the bus lanes.
Yeah, so I'm going to let Maya speak certainly to the network redesign piece. I mean, what I will say about concrete, and others from my team may want to jump in. So John, Maya, Norman, feel free to jump in here. We are experimenting, in the coming years with more hardened curb solutions for separating different areas, particularly bike lanes, but there may be circumstances where we can try them in bus lanes. Historically, we have not done physical separation for bus lanes, in large part because they do run in the middle of the street, and quick build materials like flex posts won't last if with plows kind of clearing out those lanes. In order to do a more hardened separation, we need more space. You can't just run it down the center line. You need to create a little bit of a buffer so drivers don't run into it, and so that there's enough room to get plows and to have a place for snow to go. So, I think we're starting to, we've developed some new designs that we're going to be testing out this year, likely first in bike lanes as an alternative to just traditional flex posts as a separator. But there's at least one project I'm aware of with bus lanes where we're evaluating the potential for physical separation for the bus lane, where we might actually have enough width of the roadway to do that in a safe fashion. But anyone else, Maya, do you want to jump in with anything else? Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, Christian. I was actually looking at the chat when you asked that question. So could you repeat your question about bus network redesign?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm whether Clarendon is part of the bus network redesigns, what they're calling the frequent service map, and I'm pretty sure it's like I think it's the 39.
Yeah, the 39 it's currently scheduled at high frequency. It doesn't always meet that schedule. So that will be continued in bus network redesign. And the aim is to actually get it running every 15 minutes or better all day. And part of that is through these smaller street interventions. This bus lane on Clarendon, it's honestly more of a queue jump because it's not that long. It really just serves to get the bus through that last little section up to Back Bay Station. Doing things like that will help give operators enough time to take their full break. Often when routes run behind schedule, operators are rushed through their schedules, and that's when things get thrown off time. So little changes like this, especially on Boylston and Clarendon, and then other interventions we're looking at throughout the entire Route 39, we're hoping will help that meet its high frequency designation.
And I would just add, even today, the 39 does in excess of 8,000 riders per day on a typical weekday trip. And so, when we can help a bus move through, they're not necessarily 8,000 riders on that particular block, but when we help a bus move through the congested areas of its route more reliably and quickly, that benefits everyone on that route because it reduces bunching of buses and helps ensure that the reliability for all the rest of the trips that are happening on there. So we see, even with the route as it exists today, a lot of potential benefit by speeding up that link.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Christian. RP.
Hey guys, my name's RP. I'm property manager for 745 Boylston Street. Thank you for your time and for the work that you guys are putting in to try and improve the city. I do appreciate it. I had two questions. So first off, will there be any penalty to the scooter guys for, using the bike lanes? Because I imagine, that I'm sure that given their sort of, flaunting of the laws as it is, I see them easily using these bike lanes, for their own personal, quick path. Is there going to be any sort of, oversight into that by the cops? Because it doesn't seem like there is at this point, but this just seems like, if this is to make pedestrians safer, having a pedestrian step right out and get hit by a scooter in the bike lane doesn't seem like a great, scenario to have happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an ongoing conversation we're having with the Boston Police Department about their approach and capacity for enforcement of dangerous behavior. Our focus is on things that are dangerous as opposed to things that are necessarily illegal. We would ideally like neither of those two things to happen, but the most important thing is to have some accountability when people do things that put others at risk. And to your point, I mean, we see, as people have noted, there's behavior where we see scooters on sidewalks, we see scooters in bike lanes. Not to get into the sort of weeds of bureaucratic stuff, but one of the challenges is that the state law around vehicle definitions and what rules apply to which vehicles are murky is not maybe the best word, but they're not well matched to the sort of realities of what vehicles are present on the roadway. So for example, there are some motorized vehicles that are allowed in bike lanes, others that are not under state law. Our emphasis is really about riding whatever you're riding in a way that is responsible and doesn't put other people at risk. And I think the police department is looking at this area as a place where we see a lot of behavior that we don't want and is trying to find the best approach there. So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, I don't think we have one, I don't want to speak on behalf of the police department, and two, I don't want I don't think they are at a point where they would tell you like we've got a exact game plan. More than anything, our focus, which tends to be much more on design and parking enforcement, is how do we organize the street in a way so that it is possible and safe to do the right thing no matter who you are on the street? Because sometimes we see rule breaking in places where we have not made it easy or clear for people to do the right thing. There are a few spots in the city where we see bikes go up on the sidewalk, and we don't want that. but they're often in places where there's no safe place to ride a bike. And so then we look at that and say, well, we can't yell at you for being on the sidewalk if it's dangerous for you to be in the street. Let's build safer infrastructure. And hopefully we see in most, but certainly not all cases, that leads people to, to make that path, to choose a safer path.
So just in response to that, I mean, you mentioned that, the definition of motorized vehicles is a little tricky. Are scooters prohibited from using the bike lanes, or is that a gray area where they can say, we're allowed to be in this lane?
I believe it depends on the engine size. There is a definition for a moped, which is a motorized vehicle that is allowed in bike lanes, but I would say that most of the vehicles we see for being used for delivery are at an engine size that is not legally allowed in the bike lane.
And will there be signs posted sort of, detailing that so they can't claim ignorance on that?
It's a great question. I don't think we don't have a sign yet, but it's absolutely something we can look at. We want to get the lane down. We want to see how it's functioning and how it's being used. But it's definitely something we can look at.
And then my second question was just about the general outreach, regarding the neighborhood and their concerns. I know myself and other members of the Back Bay Association felt like we weren't necessarily given enough of an opportunity to kind of illustrate our concerns here. And so I was just curious, how that was exactly handled, and how I can make sure that, I'm not, out of the loop on future projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, so first of all, apologies, right? We don't ever want people to feel out of the loop on the things that we're doing. Sometimes the projects we do, there's strong feelings in multiple directions around, but the point we are trying to organize ourselves so that everyone knows about it, who cares about it, and has the opportunity to have their voice heard. So I think it's good feedback. We have had some extensive conversations with the Back Bay Association on the Boylston Street project in particular over the last several years. Meg Mazer-Cohen has been very outspoken about the project. We've had many meetings with her in which she's brought various concerns to our attention, and there's been both a lot of email exchanged and a lot of in-person meetings where we've tried to talk through, understand those issues, and address them as best we can. One of the changes that we have made, which is actually directly in front of 745, the bus lane that is being put in place between Ring Road and Dartmouth Street is a peak hour only bus lane, and that was one of the changes that came out of that discussion with Meg and the Back Bay Association, was to try to make that road capacity available to all users, except during those commute hours when it is most essential that the bus be able to kind of make that trip quickly. I think that was kind of the biggest change. And actually that loading zone area for scooters was something that was first suggested by the Back Bay Association as well. So Maya put in the chat a link to a new webpage we've put up that to try to centralize all of the Back Bay projects. There will be tomorrow on there a newsletter sign up. We're putting in place we've tended to segment this by project, and so there is a Boylston Street newsletter, but we're recognizing that all these things interconnect, and so we need to be able to just update people generally about the Back Bay. So if you check that website tomorrow, you should find a place to sign up, and that will be the best place to stay informed.
Okay. I have one more, but I'll get back in line because.
Okay, sure. Well, we're on round two for everyone here. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to go back to the 39 bus for just a really quick second. I know because now they're talking about the Back Bay Station project again, and the bus turnaround is actually, I had worked on it back when we talked about this in 2017. I don't know if we ever finalized what was going to happen with the 39 bus, but I'm wondering how these projects, it sounds like the bus lane on Clarendon's not like a permanent change to the lanes, but how the possible rerouting of 39 is going to affect with the things that are happening on Berkeley Street. Stewart Street, all these new projects and what we had looked at back in 2017 when we weren't talking about these projects.
Maya, do you want to jump in on that? I know you've been involved in some of the rewrap conversations.
No, and that's a great question. And honestly, the future of the 39 is something I think about in my sleep. I've been a daily rider for years. And the answer is that there is not really a set answer yet. The air rights project over the Back Bay station initially included proposals to eliminate the bus turnaround. The Back Bay is pretty strapped for space, especially when you're talking about those 60-foot buses, and having a place to store them is going to be a difficult task if they cannot be in the Back Bay station turnaround. So for that project that would go over the turnaround, the details are not set in stone yet. And I know that we are very interested in keeping that turnaround because it's such a crucial space for a crucial connector. Like Chief said, the 39 carries over 8,000 people daily. That number, I think, is up since the Green Line closures. A lot of E-Line riders have shifted over. So making sure with whatever that tower ends up being, that if we can, maintaining that turnaround space is something that we are very interested in. But it's going to be a discussion that is ongoing with the developers, with the MBTA, and with all the stakeholders in the area.
Thank you.
RP, the floor is yours again.
All right. So, you know, I understand that all of these changes are done based on, you know, data that's taken and, you know, predictions that are made. And I'm just curious, after these changes are put into place, is that continued to be analyzed, or is it just sort of moving on to different things? And the reason I specifically ask is obviously with you know, the bike lane coming in, it's changing how we're going to be operating everything. Specifically, I look right out my window at Ring Road every day, and frequently I see buses try and take a right. There's a car double parked. I watched a bus unable to make that turn for 15 minutes while they waited for someone who was in Starbucks. And so with the lane moving out, obviously that gives the bus even less room to turn. And so I'm wondering if you know, if these changes are going to be reevaluated to make sure that they're having the impact that you guys want them to have.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one, yes, and in particular, the bus lane on that stretch west of Dartmouth, from Ring Road to Dartmouth, is something that we have committed to the Back Bay Association. We will do a kind of that stretch. I think was sort of the area of most concern that we heard from them, and so from the association. So we've committed to doing a more formal assessment to kind of look at how much benefit it's providing to the bus and whether there are complicating factors in congestion or double parking. On the double parking issue specifically, you know, we are making a number of changes to curb regulations all along the stretch of Boylston Street. And one of the things that we know we need more of is short-term loading. And so we are adding short-term parking / loading areas on every block that doesn't have them now. And expanding them in some cases where there are where there's more, where we feel like there's not enough. So he is in our other room, but Matt Warfield, who leads our new mobility team, did a block by block analysis of curb demand, and we are adjusting the regulations to try to match that. But the short answer is yes. We're going to be paying particular attention to these blocks where your building is. We're also, signals in general and traffic signal timing is, we use a lot of models to help guide timing and how much time we give to each movement, but no model is perfect. And so signals and traffic patterns change, right? So signal timing is kind of an ever evolving thing. And we will always kind of take the opportunities to look at the data and shifting patterns. And sometimes the adjustments are subtle, 5 seconds here and 5 seconds less there. But that's something that the city does as a regular practice.
And so there'll be will there be like some sort of continued public forum to discuss if the changes have negatively impacted, I guess? Because obviously if they positively impacted, you're not going to hear much of that, unfortunately, but the negative impact tends to, people want to speak about that, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. So all of our projects have email lists. Those are staffed by some of the people you see in this breakout room. We also, certainly, I will say the Back Bay Association knows exactly how to get a hold of us. So as an association, they will no doubt be, Meg will text me if you tell her that there's a problem. Is really what I'm trying to say. So I think but the lines of communication are open, right? And it is common for us to make modifications based on real world observations. I'm thinking of a bike lane project we put in last year, where in a couple spots we realized, actually everything's going to function better if we take out one additional parking spot to improve visibility. Or in one project, we're actually adding a parking space back in because we took it out of conservatism and we realized we can put it back. So, we can and do make adjustments once we experience the real world. And John, who is one of our principal engineers, is on the call and I think has something to add here.
Hey guys, I just wanted to chime in, Chief, to piggyback into that. So some of these streets, the primary streets in the Back Bay area or even nearby, are on regularized counts or data collection schedules. So whether it's mid blocks or primary corridors or intersections themselves, some of these things are actually kind of automated where we'll get the data back and we can kind of keep an eye on stuff. Even if we are, there's someone staffing, a room where they're watching traffic cameras and making live updates, we can still build that story of over time. If anything changes dramatically, we're not leaving it to kind of stew in the old, original position. So that's not a replacement for the lines of communication, as the Chief was just saying, but there is some redundancy to who's paying attention. So.
That's
And
great.
just to round out the team here, I'll add that in terms of bus projects, so my team is fairly new, but we are very excited about the fact that we're starting to evaluate our projects more and more. So on Huntington Ave, for example, between Brigham Circle and Gainsborough, we did a 6-month evaluation of those post-implementation to see if it was actually working and if it was worth keeping. It was. And my counterparts at the T, I talk to them every day. They tell me if something's really horribly wrong with the 39, if it's misperforming here, see if we can make some tweaks there. And we get very, very specific data, stop to stop data from the T, so we can see how the bus is doing and where we can fix it if necessary.
Great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great questions. We appreciate it. And please do give us that feedback.
Absolutely.
I don't see any other raised hands. Anybody else want to jump in? I do see a note from Lisa, although I think she has left. Okay, Maya already responded to that. Got it. But if not, we can end this very small breakout, and I think there's lots of good conversation going back in the main room, which we can jump back to. But really appreciate everybody joining, and sign up for the email list, be in touch, and thanks.
Thank you, guys.